This 1950s Hardinge HLV-H lathe slices steel to 50 millionths of an inch, thinner than a human hair, after 7 decades of relentless abuse. A modern CNC counterpart, priced at $200,000, turns into an expensive paperweight from a single faulty firmware update. Why did we abandon machines that defy time for ones that crumble under convenience? In the shadow of World War II's rubble, America faced a new reckoning. The Korean War erupted in 1950, demanding an arsenal of precision unlike anything before. Factories churned out jets, tanks, and missiles, but those weapons relied on smaller miracles: the flawless gears, dies, and fixtures crafted in tool rooms. One slip in tolerance and a bomb's fuse failed, a rifle jammed mid-battle, or a fighter plane's propeller shattered at Mach speed. Failure wasn't an option. It was national survival. Engineers at Hardinge, a company forged in the fires of the Great Depression, new mass-production lathes, those workhorses of wartime output, wore out fast under the strain. Their cast-iron beds flexed and bellied, ways ground down like worn boot heels after a few years of 8-hour shifts. The tool and die makers, the unsung wizards who built the jigs that built the bombs, needed something eternal. They needed a lathe that could birth parts precise enough for the space race dawning on the horizon, where a micron's error meant catastrophe. Hardinge answered with the HLVH in the early 1950s, not for cranking out thousands of widgets, but for the elite few who machined the masters. This was do-or-die engineering, born from the grit of a nation rebuilding its edge against Soviet shadows. To grasp the genius, picture the bed, the lathe spine, where everything slides true or false. Every other lathe before and since poured its bed from cast iron, a cheap vibration-damping alloy that starts flat, but warps under heat cycles, sags from the weight of chucks spinning at 2,000 RPM, and bellies in the center from the carriage's endless traverse. Wear creeps in like rust. Saddle sway, machinists call it, where the tool chatters and tolerances balloon from millionths to thousandths after a decade. Hardinge flipped the script with their secret sauce: a solid slab of tool steel, 2 feet long, 4 inches thick, hardened to Rockwell 60, like plate glass in toughness, then precision ground on massive surface grinders to optical flatness, deviations no more than a light wave's interference pattern. This monolithic dovetail bed sits atop a cast iron base for stability, but the steel ways bear the brunt. No casting porosity to harbor grit, no sand inclusions to pit under load. The carriage glides on these ways with V-edges biting into matching steel flanks, self-cleaning under oil film, resisting the quartz-like abrasion of steel chips that chew softer iron alive. Feel the physics. That bed weighs over 300 pounds alone. Inertia like an anvil dropped from waist height, damping harmonics that would buzz lesser machines into inaccuracy. Heat from a carbide insert gouging aluminum at 500 surface feet per minute. The steel shrugs it off, expanding only 3 millionths per degree Fahrenheit, preloaded against thermal bow. The spindle, another marvel, spins on ABEC 9 angular contact ball bearings, preloaded to 0 clearance, greased for life with synthetic that laughs at 200 degrees Celsius. No bronze bushings to score, no plain bearings to gall under starved lubrication. Vibration, near 0. You sense the cut through the handwheel like a surgeon's scalpel parting flesh. Feedback unfiltered by servos or encoders. Collettes, grip workpieces with hydraulic precision. 0 runout. Holding that 50 Euron tolerance, 0.0050 inches, across a lifetime of torque that would strip gears from a modern import. Threads cut on this beast mesh first time. No slop, no chasing with a die. Bores hone true, radii sweep perfect. It was overbuilt by a factor of 10. Safety margins from an era when good enough killed soldiers. Operators paid dearly for this immortality. Toolroom men, broad-shouldered Poles, Italians, Germans fresh from the old country, hunched over these for 12-hour shifts in shops reeking of cutting oil and ozone from arc welders nearby. No climate control. Summer heat baked the oil into acrid vapor, lungs coated black, eyes stinging from whey oil mist, hands blistered from hand wheels cranked against 3 foot-pounds of resistance, forearms knotted like oak roots from traversing tons of steel. Danger lurked in every cycle. A loose chip wedged in the ways could seize the carriage, wrenching a shoulder or snapping a finger in the half-nut clutch. Spindle starts hurled 3-inch slugs if collet slipped, embedding in walls or worse. Amputations happened. thumbs lost to spinning chucks, feet crushed under falling vices weighing 50 pounds. The bends from coolant spray chilled spines. Heat exhaustion dropped men mid-cut, reviving to the clang of Morse tapers rattling loose. Yet they revered it, these craftsmen, wiping ways with 600 grit kerosene rags, aligning headstocks with tenths indicators passed father to son. No PPE theater then, just leather aprons, safety glasses if you were fancy, and the knowledge that one bad part could doom a platoon overseas. By the 1960s, HLVHs populated Lockheed Skunk Works, turning uranium centrifuge shafts for the nuclear age, propeller hubs for SR-71 Blackbirds. They endured floods in basements, power surges that fried panels, decades of apprentices learning on granddad's machines. One still runs in a Pennsylvania museum shop, threading brass for model engines, its bed unscarred. Contrast that with today's fragility. A Haas TL1 CNC lathe, darling of startups, boasts precision via software loops that average out slop in its thin-walled cast bed. 5 years in, saddle sway hits, belts stretch, servos whine, and a Windows update bricks the controller. 6 figures in the dumpster for a plastic-faced relay board. Chinese imports like Grizzly Jiaozhan 709. Soft gray iron weighs belly after 2,000 hours. Tolerances drifting to hobbyist slop. We stopped building like Hardinge because profit ruled. Castings cost pennies. CNCs churn parts 10 times faster with good enough for disposable drones and iPhone cases. Safety theater mandates sensors everywhere, yet linear rails gall faster than dovetails under contaminated lube. Planned obsolescence whispers. Proprietary chips lock you to dealers. Firmware demands subscriptions. The tactile soul, feeling a thou through bronze and steel, died for screens and algorithms that lie smooth. But the HLVH endures, a testament to when engineers built not for quarterly profits but for the immortality of nations and the precision that pierces the void. Take serial number 51234, a 1954 HLVH that rolled out of Elmira, New York, bound for Convair's Fort Worth plant. There it machined the titanium spars for the B-58 Hustler, the first supersonic bomber to hug the deck at Mach 2, dodging Soviet radars. Those spars demanded contours held to 2 10,000ths across 30-foot wings, imperfections that would flutter to fatigue at 50,000 feet. The lathe didn't blink through 15 years of uranium carbide turning. Coolant hoses ruptured in Texas summers pushing 110 degrees. Floodwaters from the 1957 Red River lapping its base. In 1970, surplus to a San Diego job shop, it threaded hydraulic fittings for Poseidon missiles, its spindle nosing out against 500 foot-pounds without a whimper. Today, at 80 years old, it squats in a backyard shed in Chula Vista, owned by a retired Navy machinist named Hank Kowalski. He fires it up weekly, parting off Delrin knobs for his ham radio rigs, the handwheel feeding cuts so pure the chips curl like golden scrolls. No error codes, no subscription fees, just kerosene and elbow grease. Contrast that grit with the 2022 implosion of a Doosan Puma 2100 CNC at a Michigan auto supplier. This $180,000 Korean marvel, hyped for Industry 4.0 integration, machined transmission gears for electric F-150s. 3 years in, a power blip during a Microsoft patch fried the FANUC controller's EEPROM. Servos locked mid-cycle, turret crashed into the spindle nose at 1,200 RPM, shearing a $5,000 tool turret into shrapnel. The bed, thin-walled mehanite casting, already sagging from interrupted cuts on heat-treated 4340 steel. Software had been fudging the backlash with adaptive control algorithms. Total loss. Machine scrapped, production halted for weeks, millions in overtime chasing parts from Taiwan. Why? Bean counters dictated linear guides over dovetails. Cheaper to stamp, faster to assemble in Shenzhen sweatshops. Guides gall under the paste of aluminum swarf mixed with watery coolant, needing $20,000 rebuilds every 10,000 hours. Hardinge's steel laughed at such frailty. Its ways shed debris like Teflon, oil film sealing the deal. Or consider the HLVH tucked away in the Smithsonian's garage annex, tag 1956-047. It turned the collets for the Mercury capsule's attitude thrusters, those nitrogen jets that kept John Glenn steady during Friendship 7's 3 orbits. A single thou out of true, and spin stabilization fails. Capsule tumbles into re-entry plasma. The machine outlasted the program, loaned to a Virginia vocational school in the 70s, where it taught Vietnam vets to cut Morse tapers for prosthetic limbs. By 1990, digitized curricula deemed it obsolete, but a janitor squirreled it away. Restored in 2015, it now demonstrates for school groups, boring 500-inch holes in 316 stainless to gauge perfection. Dial reads 0.0020 under size, first pass, no hone needed. Meanwhile, modern precision mills like the Tormac 1100, startup darlings at $15,000, boast encoders resolving 5 millionths, yet their cast aluminum frames twist under a 10-inch vise at 8,000 RPM. A 2021 recall hit hundreds after Z-axis ball screws stripped from thermal growth mismatch. Plastic end caps melted in garages. Warranty voided for user error. Planned obsolescence. The firmware requires annual cloud calibration, $500 a pop, locking hobbyists to proprietary probes. Shift to the oil patch. An HLVH from 1957 endured the Prudhoe Bay boom, facing Alaskan winters where hydraulic oil gels at -40. It knurled valve stems for North Slope pumps, pressures hitting 10,000 psi underground. Chips froze mid-air, but the sealed bearings spun true, preload crushing any ice crystals. Shipped south in 1985 after the field peaked, it now anchors a Houston rebuild shop, refinishing shafts for frac pumps that chew rock at 100 horsepower. The owner, Miguel Reyes, logs 2,000 hours yearly. Bed wear? Measurable only by interferometry, less than 1 light band deviation after 500,000 cycles. Compare to Sandvik Coromant's latest smart lathes networked for predictive maintenance. A 2023 outage in Permian Basin ops saw 50 units go dark from a cyber glitch in the IoT backbone. Ransomware demanding Bitcoin while wells blew off gas. Cast beds bellied from aggressive feeds. Software learning to compensate until it couldn't. Scrap value barely covering the tow truck. Profit margins shaved steel thickness to 60% of Hardinge's slab. Safety theater adds encoders that fail first in EMP pulses or EMP-like surges from arc flashes. These survivors whisper of a deeper rot. Boeing's 737 MAX saga, rooted in aerodynamics fudged by software, but the wing spars started life on CNCs with toleranced castings. Millionths averaged out, until flutter tests revealed harmonic nodes the Sims missed. No tactile proofing, programmers never felt the cut. John Deere's 8R tractors, $500,000 behemoths. Brick via dealer-locked diagnostics after a harvest season. ECU update demands $8,000 annual service contract. Farmers sidelined, fields rotting. We traded eternity for velocity, masters for metrics. Hardinge's ethos, overbuild with physics not pixels, faded as Wall Street prized churn over craft. Globalism flooded markets with Me Too iron from factories where QC means a go-no-go gauge, not ringing stones. Yet echoes persist. A 1953 HLVH hums in a New Hampshire shed, threading 22 rifle barrels for custom ARs. Its owner won a national match last year, groups sub-MOA at 600 yards. Another in a British museum replicates Enigma gears for codebreaker exhibits, precision echoing Bletchley Park's shadows. They run without fanfare, outlasting empires. The cost of progress? We've gained speed but lost sovereignty. When your drone crashes from a battery swell or your EV stalls mid-commute from OTA hubris, remember the HLVH, a monolith, teaching that true power lies not in code's illusion, but in steel's unyielding truth. We've forgotten how to forge our own salvation, settling for shiny shackles. And in that forgetting, we drift toward disposability's abyss. By the 1960s, these HLVH lathes had infiltrated the blackest hearts of American industry, from Lockheed's skunk works in the California desert to Convair's supersonic assembly lines. One unit, fresh from Elmira, machined the delicate titanium fittings for the B-58 Hustler's low-level dash wings, enduring the blistering torque of interrupted cuts on Inconel alloys that glowed cherry red under carbide tools. Floods rose in 1957. Submerging it knee-deep in the Red River Basin, yet after drying it resumed without a twitch and run-out. Surplused in the defense drawdown, it migrated to missile shops, knurling control rods for submarine-launched Poseidons, shrugging off the gritty paste of titanium swarf mixed with synthetic coolant that would have pitted lesser ways into oblivion. Decades piled on like layers of case-hardened scale. In Pennsylvania tool rooms, they outlasted 3 generations of machinists, Threading dies for Apollo guidance computers, where a drift of 5/10,000ths doomed telemetry to static. Power brownouts in the 73 oil crisis fried transformers around them, but the sealed spindle bearings, preloaded against axial play, spun on, inertia carrying through voltage dips that stalled electronic piers. One survivor from 1955 weathered a shop fire in Ohio, paint blistered, leads resoldered by hand. Today it profiles radii on vintage aircraft props, the hand-feed dial registering no lost motion after 400,000 hours logged in faded workbooks. Now pivot to the present rot. Take the Haas TL1, a $40,000 CNC lathe peddled to garages and startups as the future of prototyping. Loaded with conversational programming and Ethernet ports, it promises sub-thou accuracy for makerspaces. Reality bites after 3,000 hours. The thin cast-iron bed develops chatter marks from rapid traverses, software's backlash compensation overwhelmed by the sway. A 2020 class action suit revealed hundreds bricked by a FANUC OS update pushed overnight. Servo amplifiers overheating from bad code. Axis drives homing to infinity. Scrap value? Under $2,000, tossed for a cloud-dependent clone that demands Wi-Fi to even jog the turret. Worse still, the Grizzly G0709, $1,500 import sensation flooding eBay for hobbyists dreaming big. Gray iron bed, painted glossy, looks stout until you feed 440 bar stock at 800 RPM. Within 18 months, the saddle rocks like a rowboat in chop. Weighs polished to brass sheen by abrasive chips embedding in soft castings. Forums overflow with tails, half nuts slipping mid-thread, forcing scrap and restarts. No sealed precision here, just overseas castings skimped on chill plates, porosity sucking in grit like a sponge. Scale up to enterprise. The Doosan Puma 2100 series, $180,000 fixture in Detroit Tier 1s, networked for smart factory glory. In 2022, a Michigan gear shop lost 3 to a firmware flash gone awry during a Windows security patch. Turrets slammed home at full rapids. $7,000 live tools vaporized in sparks. Beds cracked from the shock. Their mehanite castings undersized for crash stops, relying on fragile limit switches prone to coolant corrosion. Production lines starved for EV transmission shafts. Air freight from Asia burning millions while the hulks awaited $50,000 controllers from Korea. Even premium lines falter. Tormax 1100 Mir, $16,000 prosumer mill, lathe sibling in spirit, boasts glass scales resolving half-millionths, but aluminum extrusions for the frame warp under a 20-pound vise at 6,000 RPM. Z-axis ball screws preloading unevenly from garage heat swings. A 2021 recall yanked 400 units after end support sheared. Plastic housings liquefying near spindles. PathPilot software, open-source veneer over proprietary locks, required dealer reflashes costing $200 each. User error, they claimed, as if physics bows to disclaimers. Out in the fields, Sandvik Coroturns QS2520 smart lathes, tagged at $250,000 for oil field ops, integrate MT Connect for vibration alerts. Permian Basin rigs deployed dozens in 2023, chasing frac sleeves from 17 to 4 stainless. A ransomware hit via the Siemens IoT gateway froze them solid. Screens locked, hydraulics stalled, while wells vented methane at $50,000 a day. Beds optimized for 40% less mass to cut cycle times, bellied under aggressive PEC cycles. Predictive algorithms flagged wear too late. Linear rails scored by silica-laced mud until rebuilds ran $30,000 per machine. Cyber fragility meets mechanical thrift. Why the surrender? Profit first. Casting a full tool steel slab demands forge presses and heat treat ovens costing millions up front, versus stamping thin meionite in high-volume molds for pennies per pound. CNCs multiply output tenfold, spitting toleranced parts for consumer jetsam, drone frames, phone gimbals, where millionths matter less than minutes per cycle. Shareholders cheer quarterly spikes, ignoring the externality of e-waste mountains. Safety theater amplified the folly. OSHA's cascade of regs post 3 Mile Island mandated interlocks, e-stops, light curtains, sensors drowning in whey oil, false tripping on steam from hot chips. Old-school dovetails needed no nannies. Operators sensed danger through vibrating bronze. Now enclosures trap heat, Accelerometers glitch on harmonics, adding failure points that multiply downtime. Planned obsolescence seals the tomb. Fanuc and Siemens controllers lock BIOS to serial numbers. Upgrades void warranties unless through certified techs billing $250 hour. John Deere's 8R tractors embed similar kin, $600,000 rigs with lathe machined internals from precision suppliers. Yet a 2023 ECU patch for emissions bricks the hydraulics mid-plow. Farmers chained to $10,000 diagnostic subscriptions. Deere defends it as fleet management, we call it ransom. Boeing's 737 MAX MKS debacle traces here too. Wing pivot bushings, born on CNCs with averaged slop, amplified flutter and wind tunnel surprises software couldn't fully model. No hand-scraped ways to validate the feel. Pixels lied, pilots died. These HLVHs mock the parade. A 1958 model in a Utah aerospace surplus yard turned ablation-cooled nozzle throats for ICBM re-entry vehicles, surviving a 1986 forklift tip-over that bent its steady rest, straightened with a sledge back online. Another in a Florida Keys boatyard faces salt air corroding cabinets but not the core. It contours prop shafts for offshore racers, torque wrench confirming zero play after Hurricane Irma's surge. Contrast Caterpillar's latest skid steers, assemblies from global CNC farms. A 2024 recall idled 5,000 units when pivot pins, machined to ISO tolerance, galled under clay overloads. Cast frames cracking from vibes unpredicted by FEA sims run on averaged data. Downtime cost fleets $100 million, rebuilds imported. The ledger balances thus. Old iron absorbs apocalypse, modern marvels shatter on convenience's altar. We chose velocity over valor, metrics over mastery, drifting into a realm where every tool begs permission to toil. Today, these Hardinge HLV-H lathes stand as sentinels in scattered redoubts, defying the scrapyard's pull. Serial number 51234, that 1954 veteran from Convair's B-58 days, hunkers in Hank Kowalski's Chula Vista shed, its steel bed gleaming under a single fluorescent tube. Kowalski, 78 with hands scarred like weathered oak, coaxes it through weekly rituals, facing aluminum billets for antenna mounts, the cross-slide whispering across ways unmarred by 60 years of swarf storms. No digital dashboard blinks warnings, just the steady thrum of the 1.5-horse spindle, bearing sealed against the coastal damp that rusts lesser iron to dust. Across the continent, in Elmira's Hardinge Brothers Factory Museum, now a ghost of Elmira's manufacturing heyday, HLVH number 47289 idles under glass, its collé closer pristine. Restored by retirees who machined their own Gibbs from bar stock, it demos for wide-eyed apprentices, turning witness marks on 12L14 steel to prove the eternal edge. One pass at 60 surface feet per minute, and the micrometer reads 50 millionths under, chips evacuating clean without the gum-up that plagues polymer tool postmoderns. Further afield, a 1956 model anchors the National Museum of Industrial History's shop floor in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, once the steel heart of America. It birthed fixtures for the X-15 rocket plane's titanium airframe fittings, tolerances holding through hypersonic wind tunnel abuse. Today, volunteers fire its half-nut for cannon barrels on scale models, the quick-change gearbox shifting without slop, outlasting the museum's HVC glitches that fry PLC controls on neighboring exhibits. In private hands, survival stories multiply. Miguel Reyes' 1957 Prudhoe Bay Survivor dominates his Houston Bay, refinishing splined shafts for Halliburton frac irons that pulverize shale at 15,000 psi. After 40 years of Arctic grit and Gulf humidity, laser alignment shows ways deviated by less than 2 light bands. Optical perfection intact. Reyes scoffs at his neighbor's Okuma LB3000, a $120,000 CNC sidelined last month when a coolant pump solenoid stuck from diluted whey oil, flooding the enclosure and shorting the Siemens 840D panel. 8 weeks and $18,000 later, it's limping. Reyes's Hardinge hums uninterrupted. Even in obsolescence's jaws, they persist. A fleet of 5 HLVHs rusts in a derelict Syracuse warehouse, slated for the melter until a machinist collective bid them free last spring. Refurbed with donor spindles from eBay hauls, they now thread M-code prototypes for boutique firearms, groups tightening to half MOA where polymer 80% lowers warp under heat. Contrast the Ruger Factory's 2023 Halt 20 DMG Mori NLX 2500s, $300,000 each, bricked by a zero-day exploit in their Celos interface, malware from a phishing email halting AR-15 bolt carrier production for days, thin-walled beds, optimized for chip-to-chip speeds, cracked under torque spikes the software failed to damp, replacements airlifted from Japan at premium freight. Abroad, echoes resound. In a black country shed near Birmingham, England, a 1952 import, smuggled post-war, knurls knobs for restored Spitfire cockpits, its bed resisting the damp that bellies Bridgeport clones. The owner, a Jaguar engineer pensioned off, logs it religiously. 750,000 hours, no rebuild. Meanwhile, Renishaw's latest metrology lathes, wired for 5G feedback, stutter in UK machine tool expos when Ethernet lags spike, turrets homing erratically on cast frames prone to thermal bow from LED shop lights. Scrapped? Rare but poignant. One 1959 casualty met the torch in a Detroit consolidator after GM deemed it non-ergonomic for OSHA audits, replaced by FANUC-equipped pods that now idle from chip shortages. Its steel slab fetched $200 as alloy scrap, while the CNC fleet demands $2 million yearly in uptime contracts. These relics cluster in garages, museums, and madmen's ateliers, a diaspora of defiance. They power custom watch lathes for Patek Philippe homage builds, profile dies for vacuum tube amplifiers defying solid-state sameness, even bores for boutique telescope mirror cells where wavefront error must kiss lambda perfection. The legacy? A rebuke to our gilded fragility. We engineered the HLVH when nations teetered on precision's knife edge, forging steel that outlives regimes because it honored physics over spreadsheets. Modern altars, stacked with servo-driven husks, their linear rails scarred by outsourced coolant paste, plastic gearboxes stripping under overloads like cheap razors, enshrine convenience as God. Software updates cascade like digital rust. Bricking John Deere combines mid-harvest when OTA emissions tweaks overload ECUs, or stranding Tesla gigafactories when NVIDIA GPUs overheat from unchecked fab dust. Boeing outsources spars to Spirit Aerosystems CNC farms, where average tolerances hide flutter demons, until Alaska Airlines loses a door plug at 16,000 feet. Profits calculus gutted the overbuild. Why quench a 400-pound steel monolith when stamped castings multiply margins? Safety theater piles on brittle sensors, proximity lasers fogged by vapor, e-stops latched by stray chips, yet ignores the human antenna lost to joysticks. Planned obsolescence reigns. Proprietary FANUCs demand $5,000 health checks, voiding tinkering that kept HLVHs immortal. Progress's toll? We've bartered tactile sovereignty for simulated sheen, mastery for middleware. When cyberstorms silence your smart grid or plastic EV batteries swell in summer stalls, the HLVH mocks from the shadows. True endurance scorns subscriptions, thrives on sweat, and bends not to bits but to the unyielding laws of mass and metallurgy. In forgetting that brute gospel, we've chained ourselves to cycles of churn, exiles in our own ingenuity, watching empires of e-waste rise while steel sentinels endure.